Hi, good evening. It's February 12th, 2025. This is the meeting of the Finance Committee. Let's see, I'll start with the prior minutes. That was from January 8th, I believe. Those have been circulated. Any comments, questions, motions?
Make a motion to approve.
Dave made a motion to approve the minutes, seconded by Carly. Okay, we have people on Zoom, so we have to do roll call.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Bob?
I'm going to abstain, Mr. Chairman, as I was not present for the meeting.
Okay, Lauren?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
I assume that's all we have on the board, so, okay, so that's unanimous. I didn't have an invitation to speak on the agenda, but I'll give invitation to speak. Anything? Okay. Now, update from the finance director. We're going to have to improvise a little bit tonight. Zach is ill. Paul and Tom will come up. We can make this an abbreviated version, but we can at least tell folks what you've been up to.
And Zach might come on at some point, but that's okay if he doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to make a note, Zach is not here because he's ill. It's not that he
Sure
just
is.
didn't show up.
I didn't say that.
No.
Zach is ill.
Okay, so if we, to begin with, we're just going to go into, as we're beginning the budget process for the next fiscal year, which begins July 1st. This is just a preliminary run that we do every single year to just show that we are in a position that we have we can balance a budget giving certain constraints. Some of these were discussed at the chairman meeting a couple weeks back, some of the financial goals for the town going forward. And so we have on one side of the sheet that we're looking at estimated revenues for next year.
So this is something you guys give us, just to refresh everybody, every February, and in the bottom left-hand side are a few of the sort of penciled-in assumptions, if you will, or at
Yeah.
least placeholders, maybe?
Yep, and we can briefly just highlight what some of those are. And this report we put together throughout the process. So as the months go on, we'll have better numbers from the state. We'll make more accurate revenue projections, seeing how the rest of the year plays out. And then we'll be getting expense budgets in, and so that will give us some footing to see where we're starting at. So we start out with the first point there, the biggest chunk of that is the levy, and that's, it starts out at what last year's levy what could have been. We had tax relief or excess levy capacity of around $6 million last year, but when you calculate the 2.5, you go by what the full levy could have been last year. We have the 2.5 added to that estimated new growth. We're putting that in for 950 at this point. We typically don't get any number from the assessors until around August or September. So at some point, we have to make some kind of assumption.
And early on, the number you had, it ended up being higher, wasn't it?
Yes.
When it was all said and done, this is an estimate on the new growth, but through the process, when it was all said and done, it turned out to be higher than that.
Yeah, there was over $1 million last year. So we're going to put it a little bit less than that. But this is just estimates starting out, so you don't want to put a higher number in there and then find out it doesn't materialize. So the new
Well, we've
growth.
always used a conservative number.
Yeah, that's because it has been over the years anywhere from 500,000,
I'd
700,000,
hate to make it
1.4 million.
1.4 million, which was the top, and then end up $500,000 short.
Yeah. So you're trying to, be conservative but be realistic as well. And these are, based on our estimates running right now. And there are backup pages behind that show revenue by department in the subsequent pages behind. We're not going to get into that level of detail. The next number after that is the preliminary estimates from the state. So that would be the governor's proposal that came out at the end of January. So we have that in as the full number, 60 million and 12,000 plus. That number will change when the House makes a review of it. The Senate will make a review. There'll be a conference committee review and a final, usually we'd like to see it by the end of June, but sometimes it's not until the first week or two in July after we've already approved the budget.
And just for everyone's benefit, that's a gross number, and there are assessments against that number that you put on the right-hand side.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that as we get to it, yep. And so other things that are funds that come from the state, one of them is a local receipt, which is our room occupancy tax. There are some offsets to that state receipt. The library piece and the school choice, those go directly to the library and directly to the school system. So that's school choice money that goes to the school. So we have to subtract that out because that is not an available fund to the general account. So that goes into their choice. Below that are our two enterprise funds, sewer and water. The two of those total $13 million. That gives us an astounding $176 million. We don't need to go into the smaller digits for this purpose. On the other side of the equation is our projected expenditures by general type: general government, public safety, education, public works, culture, recreation, debt, employee benefits, transfers to other funds. The numbers in the columns in the middle are the department numbers that those begin with. So if you have a certain department that you're the department head of, those are the codes that it'll begin with. Some assumptions that we made on that side of the equation are noted at the bottom to the left. Overall, almost every department, we just took whatever last year's number was, we multiplied it by a 3% to come up with just some basic number. This is a starting point. These are not numbers that we're telling departments they have to hit, or numbers that are a goal for any particular department. This is a guideline to start out. Some we put in different numbers, and those are noted along that. So the school department, we are estimating at this point about a 7.5% budget increase, which is $5.5 million. Part of that is their increase in Chapter 70 net, the increase on the assessment, which is the other half of the education costs that the town has to pick up. We'll discuss that more. That's what's held back from the state. So that's a net of 5.5. We have 7.5% in there for starter. Retirement, we have a solid number in there. It's 7%. It might be slightly below that. And these are some of the bigger expense line items. Health insurance, we're putting in about 8%. It looks like this year we may be a little short, and so we're going to be working through a few things to see. We're not going to have rates, new approval rates until, like, I believe, April. And so we're not going to know what the rates are going forward. But at this point, we're anticipating at least about an 8% increase.
On that point, Paul, I got an email from Dr. Fitzpatrick in the last few days regarding BVT, and there was something in the email about a 4% health insurance jump. I don't know if you saw that.
I was not privy to that, no.
Remind me to forward you that email. I'd just be curious if that is for all of their personnel, and if it is, if we can find out what they're doing.
I'll see Chris Pillar in the morning and get an update from him on that piece, okay? Chris.
Yeah, and sometimes it's your utilization that's going to affect your rates. So they may have a different pool because they're a school system. Well, the whole thing of, yes. The utilization, demographics of your insured pool, that can make a...
But that's an increase. You're talking about us getting 8% and them getting 4%.
But what Paul is saying is that the BVT school employees may be younger, less...
I'm not going to...
That would affect the base rate.
That would affect the base rate.
I think the question to ask is, why is BVT only going up 4%?
Right. So part of that
We're
can be...
going up double.
Yeah, so sometimes your rate of increase is based on your utilization. So a certain population that may have a higher price to begin with may be more susceptible to comorbidities and other things, which drives the cost of this group at a higher rate.
It's
than a
warranted
group
to
of
find
another.
out why.
Yeah, and it could be the type of insurance they have or who they're with, what's covered.
I'll send the chairman out a reply in the morning.
Okay, so as we finish out that, we have, just for starting points, we have police and fire in at about 4.5% each. They typically tend to be a little higher than average because of...
I'm contacting Rico and Mario.
Bob, you might
Need
want to
to
mute
mute.
yourself.
Wasn't sure about that one.
Okay, go on.
Okay. And then one department that we actually are planning on reducing a little bit, unemployment, we're reducing it by 20%. It's not a huge number, but the last 3 years have been very low, and so we don't need to have it at where it's at. And by doing that adjustment, it kind of gets us to where we break even. We're at about a $13,000 deficit at this time, but that's
And again, for the
Really
record,
irrelevant.
we pay dollar for dollar unemployment.
yes.
So whatever people hear about the unemployment rate is going up or down for the state, it does not apply to municipal.
Yeah.
Every dollar that somebody claims in unemployment that's a Milford employee, we pay 3 months later.
So then the lower half of the expenditure on that, the right side, other financing uses, the first one is stabilization. We're anticipating depositing $1.86 million in the stabilization account. That's up from last year, and the thought behind that is this is for our long-term capital, things like a school project that may be on the horizon, but things like that. We are increasing it by the amount of debt that fell off the schedule last year, so that we're maintaining that same budget capacity for debt. So as let's just say 150,000 falls off, we're going to, we're talking about the total payments, not just the principal that's being reduced. We're going to add that to the stabilization account so that we're maintaining that ability to pay that amount of debt while we're still putting money away for anticipated project on the horizon that's going to cost substantial amounts of funds. Overlay account is held by the assessors. They give us that number. So we'll have to see. That's a complete guess at this time, but close to what it's been for the last few years. The next number is a large number. The assessments, it's about $5.1 million. This is what's held back from the state. So everyone loves to say how much you're getting in state funds and how much money you're getting and how much they're increasing school funding and things like that. The other half of that equation is the money that they're holding back. And so we are on one side of the equation, it's saying that we're getting $60 million approximately from the cherry sheet money, but we're actually really only getting 55 because that extra $5 million under assessments the town is not receiving. So the biggest components of that are your school choice out and your charter school. So those two components have been growing very, very large over the last 8 to 10 years. And so that becomes something that we have to equate on the expense side of the equation. So even though we think we're getting more from the state, nobody likes to say that you're actually getting $5 million less. In our budget, so on the tax levy, so in our budgeting, not talking about from free cash, but through our budget, we're trying to accommodate $1.75 million in capital. So that would allow for capital expenses, not counting free cash. So depending on how that could be available, there could be more or less money. Depending on how the budgeting works out, could be more or less. The next figure on there is the FY 2025, which is the current fiscal year's levy adjustment. So this year we had approximately $6 million in excess levy capacity. So we didn't go to the full levy that we could have. We were about $6 million lower. And so that is our goal for this year. So one of the goals that was discussed at the chair meeting was trying to accommodate the needs of the town, the needs of the departmental budgets, but also looking at from the taxpayer's perspective and trying to keep that $6 million on that side of the equation. That, in fact, will be useful to keep for a few more years until we begin funding the next big project, where we anticipate that number will probably be reducing versus going to a debt exclusion or an
At
override.
$80 a million, that reduces the amount we ask for taxpayers to pay by $480 this year.
Yeah.
People don't understand the impact of $6 million, but when you distill it down to $80 a million, if we didn't put that number in there, the average tax bill in Milford would go from $6,500 to $7,000.
Yeah, well, that's a good approximation.
Yeah, and the levy adjustment and the stabilization, those two pools we're anticipating, as you said, to be available at least in meaningful part in connection with the high school, and that's currently our buffer against 2.5 and debt exclusions.
Yeah, so that is with some financial foresight, looking forward, instead of spending up to our operating budget maximum, and then finding ourselves in a different predicament with whatever the project is that comes down the road.
Okay, this is a helpful overview. Our next meeting is probably going to be 4 weeks from now, and as I understand it, Zach had asked for department heads to have their budgets in sometime around mid-March,
The 14th.
the 14th of
And
March.
it'll be part of that memo I gave you guys.
So if I forget to mention it, department representatives, if people between now and March 12th can reach out to whoever their counterpart is in the departments to see when their draft of their budgets will be available, and just take a look at those and be prepared to update us on them. Is there anything else you think we need to cover right now?
No, not unless there was any particular
Any
questions.
questions? Dave?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This might be a question for the school committee, but I am curious if there's been any chatter within the financial team of, been discussions of eliminating DESI, right? So what would you know what effect that would have, if any, on our funding, or has there been any chatter about that?
I think what Dave is talking about is the potential elimination of the Department of Education, and if that went to its logical extreme, there's $5 million, I think, in federal grants that are part of the education budget. Is that what you're talking about, David?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, to see if there's any what
I-
implication, I mean, is there an analysis that what implications would occur if something were to happen to the Department of Education?
I mean, my first thought would be, it might be putting the cart before the horse, because until things are actually happening, we can spend a lot of whatever hair we have left on our head speculating over whatever scenario you choose. But at this point, we don't know if that impact would just eliminate a level of the government versus the funds that go with it. So sometimes, because from things that I've heard, they want to leave education with the states, so that may or may not affect the actual funding, but may eliminate some of the bureaucracy that's in between. So I think at this point, it's premature to even speculate as to what that might be.
Yeah, I know they're talking about like vouchers for private schools and whatnot, or even vouchers for school choice. I just, just didn't know if the town's preparing for that, or we just, like you say, or wait to see what happens.
Massachusetts already has charter schools and school choice, so we're already underneath some of those things that maybe aren't involved in other states. So I'm not really sure, because we already have charter and choice.
I just noticed one of the assumptions is, and this is all for FY 2026, the geriatric revenue of $740,000. It's probably worth taking a 90-second detour right now on that issue. My understanding, and Paul and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Countryside was behind on bond payments that were due for calendar 2024, but then I think it was in January of this year, they received that long-awaited earned revenue credit or whatever it was from the IRS, somewhere to the tune of $1 million. And it sounds to me like they used a significant chunk of that to get current with the bond payments with the town. Is that correct?
Yes, they came down and gave us a check for $729,000, which got them current. But, just so you know, a week later, they came for the last $250,000 that was appropriated through town meeting for them, so they did get that.
They drew from the
Yes,
town?
which was the last installment that they were eligible for, and they did take that.
So this budget is assuming that we're going to collect $740,000 from them next fiscal year. At this point, I don't know if that assumption is good, bad, or indifferent. My read, and I don't want to get into a dialogue on this right now, because Countryside's not here. I did ask Phil Sierra-McCauley for additional information, but I think he's on vacation right now. But just from a high-level standpoint, based on the financial statements that we've been getting, it appears that the losses are lower for 2024, but there are still losses. So, we'll have to think a little bit on that revenue projection, but I understand it's just an assumption for the moment.
Yeah, I think one thing that might help that, getting a look at if they have their January numbers and see what they've put in their budget for the year for both sides of the equation, for their revenue and expenses,
Yeah.
to see if they're closing the gap on having a balanced budget in their proposal. So that would be useful as of the end of January, their first month of their new calendar year.
The good news is they're current, and they haven't asked us for money.
Yes. We're thankful for that. Anybody else for Paul and Tom? Seeing nobody?
Real quick, though, I'll go over, I did give you, everybody a memo, 2-page memo.
Okay.
And this is the memo that'll actually go out to all the department heads. Actually, I wanted to wait until after tonight, but certainly starting tomorrow, all the department, and you can read through the memo, I'll just give you the highlights. Budget packets are teed up and ready to send out, will be distributed after this meeting beginning tomorrow. Subcommittees, to your point, can start beginning to reach out to the departments to begin, or at least schedule appointments, but they're going to get all the directives tomorrow. So by tomorrow and Friday, they should have everything, and hopefully they'll start to work on it where everybody can call each department and start to talk to them. The departments that fall under the Personnel Board, we've instructed them to use a 3% increase target on their personal services as every year. We didn't hear from the Personnel Board yet, but they will be meeting, we'll be voting on it, and the assumption is it'll be 3%, and that's what we're going to target. Again, at least the personal services. And then, just as an FYI, the following union contracts are expiring as of June 30th, FY25. Fire, police, library, water, and mace. Some may be resolved by June, FY25. Some may carry over, and if that's the case, obviously we'd have to wait till October town meeting to disperse any of the results of the contracts. But we do have 5 contracts coming up for renewal, so keep that in mind as well.
Fire and police,
Yes,
they're going to dwarf any others.
yeah, sure. Library, water, mace.
Yes, Mike?
You mentioned 3% personnel services. Are we to assume that includes 3% also for operating expenses other than personnel services?
Well, we were going to try to level fund that. We start out every year level funding, and then we deal with the exceptions, and if there's an exception that needs to be discussed, you will instruct them to come in and speak to you. But the directive will be level funded on expenses, 3% of personal services, okay? And there you go.
Same as all the previous years.
Yeah,
Oh, no, you went up one. You went from 2.9 to 3%.
yeah.
You guys are good?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, subcommittee department updates. Mike, I know you wanted to...
Yeah. Regarding the proposed Guilford Public School District FY26 budget, for context, last year's FY25 school budget was about $73.8 million. The initial FY26 proposed school budget with level service plus initiatives started out at $83.8 million and represented an approximate 13.5% increase. The $83.8 million budget number consisted of $79.4 million for level service, which was a $5.57 million or 7.55 increase in level service alone. So level service, 7.55% of that 13.5%. Plus adding the new proposed spending of $4.46 million led to the overall increase of the approximate 13.5% that I just mentioned earlier. However, meetings between the school committee and the school administrations have so far whittled that overall increase number down from approximately 13.5% to approximately 9.5%. And discussions are ongoing toward the 7.5% target number that Paul mentioned earlier in his worksheet.
I did attend a school committee meeting last night where which I think Al did the same thing last year. I gave them a little heads up of the preliminary work that Zach and Paul and their people had done, and where that comes out. And, I'm sure it's a little less than they would like to be seeing, but, I did point out to them that one of the overarching goals is the preservation of the excess levy capacity and the stabilization, which is going to be inuring to substantial degree to their benefit when the high school project unfolds. So I just want to make sure everybody has current information so they know what we've been looking at and working on. Yes, Al?
Just to beat the drum that I always beat, those words, level services,
Yes.
I categorically refuse to accept the term level services, because that means that nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets more efficient, and programs that we've put on 20, 30 years ago haven't changed. You cannot run a budget starting with level services, as you mentioned. That jacks you up twice inflation. I have a hard time understanding twice inflation being the baseline. But then you add the new initiatives, which are new expenses, which with level services never come off,
Right.
and you're back in that hole. If you want to level anything, start with level funding and add on. But I know that's something that nobody wants to talk about. But every time we've gotten it back in 2003, we got into this level services game. And eventually, the lines crossed where we're getting 4 or 5% increase in general funding, and if you increase 9 to 13%, you can't sustain it, and especially with the high school coming on, because that's going to be $300 million expense. So we got to be careful with this thought of level services, because that assumes that everything is the same.
Well, you do have to admit that these are contract employees, or union employees in many cases, a good number of them, and they have increases built into their contract or labor agreement. You can't do level funding when you have contracts like that in place. You have to go to a level service scenario for the most part, because the increase is inevitable as part of level service.
With all due respect.
And also utility increases and other elements that increase as part of a level
Michael, with all
service.
due respect, there's no union contract that I've ever read that says you must have X number of teachers employed.
I mean,
It says it goes up 5%, 10%,
Okay.
goes up 20%.
Anytime the town of Milford wants to take a position of level funding and somehow manage to vote on that, whether it be a town meeting or whatever, fine. But at the present time, it's level service, and that is controlled by the school committee.
I'm not saying,
Town meeting.
I'm not saying you end in level funding, but you start with level funding to say, okay, what's changed? Well, we got X% of salary increase, we got
Now you're
utilities.
talking semantics, because you're going to end up with the same number.
Well, I mean, what you guys are talking about is just part of the broader analysis that we did some work on this back in September. We had a chart, I think Paul had done the draft of that chart, where we showed the town expenses over time were going up at 6+%, and the tax revenues are going up at 4%. And, you both make valid points. I mean, ultimately, the lines would cross, and, when hard decisions have to be made, you do need to be looking at, to Al's point, things like sunset committees that are looking at old initiatives, understand that people are not going to do that or want to do that until they absolutely have to, right?
Correct.
But that is something that may have to be entertained at some point. Now, the school department is really sort of an odd duck in some respects, because they've got all the Chapter 70 money coming in, and you can argue the school case either way and say, on the one hand, our contribution to their operations is smaller as a percentage than other departments over the last several years because of the Chapter 70 contribution. On the other hand, we are setting aside a substantial portion of our excess levy capacity and stabilization in anticipation of their project. And if you look at things like health insurance and current debt service, particularly with Woodland, they have a disproportionate impact. So there are a lot of different pieces involved there, and if anybody really wants to dive deep into this, I and Paul and a few other people have been looking at and preparing multiple charts on this in the past few weeks. So it's all interesting stuff. I think you both make fair points. But
A couple more points.
go on.
A couple side points regarding Chapter 70 and local contribution. The preliminary Chapter 70 funding amount, which is the governor's number, which, as Paul said, this has to go through legislature and all. But the governor's number for Chapter 70 school funding is $54.5 million. This is up $5.75 million from last year's number. Local contribution last year was about $25.1 million. Just guessing, I would estimate local contribution for FY26 could be in the area of $26.3 million, but that's very preliminary as it depends on final Chapter 70 numbers and final school budget numbers. This is very much partway through the whole process. So finally, the Education Subcommittee is scheduled to review proposed school budget numbers over the next week and a half, leading up to a subcommittee review meeting on February 24th. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Anybody else want to contribute anything on any groups? Oh, Al?
Capital, we met with the Parks Department because the town park project is being expanded. We originally approved a $2 million proposal to do 4 things: bandstand, bathhouse, town park, and Pearl Street. We spent $2 million, which is the money we had on town park. So that leaves 3 projects that the Parks Department would like to move forward with. And they don't have official numbers, but we're talking about $750,000 to $800,000 for the bathhouse, $140,000 for the bandstand, and $400,000. So that $2 million project could be 3.5.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much detail we want to go into this on right now. My first question would be, are all of these required to preserve the grant?
Apparently, the bathhouse is.
That's the 750 to 800.
Right.
But the other 2,
I'm not sure if the bandstand total renovation is required. And Pearl Street, I've been told, is a separate project now. They took it out. The work has to be done by June of 2026 to meet the grant.
is this anything that we need to consider tonight, or is this going to be?
No, just a heads up, because as we start looking at budgets and expenses, that's $1.5 million that we didn't count on. And what we suggested is that we're going to have a meeting in March with the capital subcommittee, and maybe at the full FinCom, because this is major money. We have the Parks Department come forward.
Well, yeah, so I guess what I would ask in anticipation of the March capital meeting, Al, if you can get somebody to put a stake in the ground as to what projects are legally required to preserve the grant, number 1. Number 2 is establishing when these projects all have to be completed for preservation of the grant, and how that would affect whether this needs to be approved in May or October, right? I think those pieces of information at a minimum we'll need to know.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely, Colin.
Can we also understand how the 4-phase projects, just phase 1 of 4 got eaten up with the total amount of money?
That would be a great thing to know.
That's what we asked here earlier.
The good news was there's no pushback about the request of making sure there's a clerk of the works. Because when the pool went $166,000 over, we had no clerk of the works. Somehow that just got approved without money being allocated. So we had to clear it up afterwards. Hopefully having a clerk of the works, if and when we go forward with any of these projects, there'll be some controls and oversight.
Is the only reason why this didn't stop because it is 4 mini projects in one big project? Like, to your point out, there is, like, if this was one big project, like, I would argue, trying to put a bathroom where they've done all this work, you're gonna, and if done at a different time, like we talked about with the high school, you could compromise work that's already been done on, I don't know how you get equipment in there or not.
That's a series of questions that have not been.
Add that one to the list for March.
Thank you.
There's good news that I asked about the pool because the rumor was that it's not ADA compliant and we'd have to do work on the pool. And Jimmy came back and said that, in his opinion, there will be no extra funds required or no significant funds required to make the pool bathroom ADA compliant. Now, he wasn't promising that, but that was a question that was floating out there.
So you made all the great points, Mr. Chairman, about making sure that we're in compliance with the grant, about work that needs to be completed or pulled out. And that's one of my concerns, is pulling out a part of the project that was included in the grant. So my question is that, do we have anybody in-house that is managing the grant to make sure that we're in compliance, or how is this working? I mean, is it the legal counsel looking at this, or should we ask legal counsel to look at this, or?
Well, I was at a meeting many months back where Mitch Rashidi was involved. He used to be on the finance committee. He's involved in grants. He's the town administrator of Hopedale. Somehow he was involved in this. So he seemed to have a hand in this. I assume Rick Villani is looking at this, I would hope in conjunction with town council, but I don't know the details.
So through, I don't know, how can we do this? So through the minutes, or can we ask for a confirmation of how this grant is being monitored or being worked out?
I was going to say, I think that's a great question. It is within the purview of the Finance Committee to ask legal counsel, to ask Brian or Jerry, I'm not sure which one would be, what is it we're on the hook for, and what are the ramifications if we miss?
I haven't seen the grant. And I don't,
Well, no, but I'm just
Yeah, I
saying,
know, I
I'd feel a lot better to
Yeah,
answer
me
your question if Brian came back and said A, B, C, D, or Jerry says D, E, F.
right.
Do you want to invite one of them to the March meeting?
I think we should write a letter and ask ahead of time,
Okay.
so we don't catch them
Who's
flat-footed.
we? Is that me or is that you? Just for my notes.
I'll do it. But it's a legitimate question, and I'd hate to have Brian or Jerry or both come in flat-footed and say, here's our question. I'd rather ask,
No, yeah, exactly. I'd rather do
I'd
that.
rather ask them like next week, give them 3-4 weeks to prepare.
I agree with you. Paul, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Is any of the work that's being proposed beyond the scope of the original project that was approved by town meeting?
Advanced then.
So these other things that are being
No,
proposed-
that was part of my question, Paul.
Oh, okay.
I thought that based on how you explained it out, these 4 are subparts of the bigger project that were all the first project.
Yes.
So that was all within the scope of the first project that was approved by town meeting. None of these things are extra on top of that.
I believe so.
Right.
I mean, it's clearly not gone well, but, I mean, I think we know what we need to do at this point to figure out what has to be done, whether the things that have to be done in the way that are being proposed, how does the grant and the deadlines fit in? I mean, I think we understand the
And
issues.
some of it is definition, because we asked the question of, do we need 3 bathrooms, a male, a female, and a family? Now, originally, somehow, the thought came out that that was an ADA requirement. Then we had a citizen, Harold Rhodes, come forward and say, you don't need 3 bathrooms. Jimmy brought up tonight saying there's a formula, like when we went through the high school field, I remember the formula said we needed like 19 stalls in the bathrooms, and we had to get a waiver. So there's still questions that I think are worth exploring, and to find out, like expanding, we asked specifically, the renovation of the building, I keep calling it a bathhouse, but that has connotations that aren't accurate.
It's a restroom.
It's a restroom. But $800,000 restroom seems pricey. But the question was, are we expanding it? And the park, Jim Asam said, absolutely not. We're building on the foundation that's there already. But I don't know how you get a 20 by 20 extra room. So there's still some confusion. At least I'm old and sometimes I'm not as quick as other people. But having a building and adding a 20 by 20 or a 20 by 10 extra room, I don't know how you do that on the existing foundation.
They reduced the bathroom.
Second floor.
These and other questions, as they say. Okay, thanks for the update, Al. Does anybody else want to provide updates on anything before we move on? Okay. Last item, and it is my fervent hope that we do not have to talk about these issues more after tonight. So everyone remembers we had the issue of the appointments, the committee size, our issues with the select board, a bylaw I proposed in early January, difficulties I had been having in trying to get dialogue going with the select board, et cetera. So developments since then. Well, first I got a unsolicited email from the town moderator who sent me some detailed factual information on the 32 or so representative town meetings in Massachusetts, which I thought was helpful. So just for everyone's edification, the 2 most populous sizes for finance committees in those 32 towns are 9 and 15. So we actually are not unreasonable in having a 15 number. The 11 number that I had originally proposed was based upon a survey of a dozen surrounding towns, but Michelangelo Bontempo helpfully gave me all the information on representative town meetings, so that was helpful information. The second thing I learned is more or less consistent with what I had read in my other sources, is that only 2 out of the 32 of these communities have the select board making the finance committee appointments. 24, I believe, out of the 32 have the moderator, and the balance have some sort of a mixed bag. Now, that may all be sort of a side note based on what I'm going to talk about next, but just for purposes of everyone's information, should this ever become relevant at any time, I just want everyone to know what's in my head. So after our January meeting, Al started pushing with various select board members to have a meeting. And the upshot of that was Al and I met with Mike Walsh and Rick Fulani 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had a long discussion, and I think it was productive. And I think where things landed was that they seemed to be willing to not try to at least in the immediate term, drive down the size of our committee. It sounds like they're willing to consider flexibility on our size up to our existing maximum size. And they're also willing to entertain us being able to give recommendations to them. So at the conclusion of that meeting, we decided that it made sense, especially, I know everyone had a concern that, we should try, if we can, to make things work in a collaborative way with the Select Board. And so we decided that we should try to give this a go to see if we can work out this arrangement in the spirit of compromise. I still question the framework just based on, the whole structure of government and separation of powers, et cetera. But again, in the interest of compromise. Now, his immediate reaction was, well, we should try to put up a name or two and see if this arrangement is going to bear fruit. Al asked to be put in charge of nominations. And we decided to have a meeting of the executive subcommittee to discuss nominations. Now, before I go any further, Jerry, are you on?
I'm here.
Okay. I know you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm fine.
Okay, so you
Can you hear me?
Yes, you had raised a concern with me recently in this regard, so before I go any further, I will turn the floor over to you if you wish.
I'll pass at this point in time. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I want full transparency, so I'll tell you my view on this is that the Select Board is still going to be the appointing authority. We are merely in a position to make recommendations, and that when I, which is effectively no different than it's been for the last decade and a half, when I was appointed to the Finance Committee 8 years ago, there were 4 people in the conversation. There were the 3 members of the Select Board, and there was the Finance Committee Chair. So this is actually the way we have proposed to handle the recommendation process, is actually expanding that process so that now we have the 3 members of the Select Board and the 5 members of our executive subcommittee who are in the conversation. And the bylaw that was proposed last month that was approved also proposed using the executive subcommittee as the body to work on nominations. There's a lot more I could say on that subject, but I'll leave it at that for now. Since Al wanted to take charge of the nomination process, I'm going to let him talk about the next step. Go ahead, Al.
Well, the agreement is that the Select Board will take our recommendation heavily into consideration. They are still the appointing authority. We went through the talent bank, and there were 4 names in the talent bank. And in the spirit of transparency, last year, I asked most of you to try and find candidates that we could recommend. And I thought, we got plenty of old men like me on this committee. We should find somebody with a younger perspective. Because when we start talking about social media, you want somebody who grew up with social media, not somebody who's read the article. And the same thing, we have 3 great members who are women, but it's 3 out of 12. So we'd like to see more participation by women. And I'm sorry if that sounds chauvinistic, but I really believe we'd be a stronger committee if we had younger and some more females on our committee. I mean, Joycey, Lauren, Carly, you've been great at your input and taking on committees, so I'd love to see that perspective expanded. We went through and we chose the executive committee because that was a subcommittee already set up that was voted on by the full committee. And we came up with 2 names. What we decided was we had 2 names that we moved forward. Ashley Douglas,
Yeah.
Ashley Douglas, and Bill Farrell. Bill Farrell was interesting because he's,
Can someone,
What's the FBI tonight?
Bob, can you mute?
Billy Hyatt, Christina.
Bob DeVita.
He's done, he's muted.
he's muted.
It's muted now.
Thank you.
Just watch out, he doesn't unmute. Just heard him.
All right,
So Bill Farrell has been a lifelong financial director at large companies, so he brings an interesting perspective. The committee unanimously wanted to recommend him to the select board, and Ashley really impressed us for all the right reasons, and the bonus was she's young and she's female. But I wanted to make sure that everybody understood she met the criteria first. It was just a bonus that she's young and female.
and I'd like to just add a couple of things about Ashley, is that, again, I was asked by Al and Chris about a year ago. They said we could use somebody younger, and it'd be nice if we had another female, go find somebody. So I had prevailed upon Ashley, who is my niece, to give this a go. I abstained from that vote. I left the meeting during the interview process. I made clear to everybody on the executive board that I absolutely did not want anybody appointed that night unless the rest of the group were thoroughly satisfied. And I even offered to withdraw her name if there were any concerns. Al insisted that she go forward. So I just want everybody to know that perspective.
There she is.
Yes, that's my medical monitor. Teach me to have a cookie before the meeting. Sorry, that's my blood sugar going up. It should be noted that Ashley was nominated by me, not by Andy. And one of the questions that I asked her is, will you have an issue voting against your uncle if you disagree? Her answer was perfect. Without blinking, she said, I do it all the time now. So Bill Farrell and Ashley were voted unanimously to be moved forward. For the third spot, we didn't want to just fill it. So we decided what we should do is advertise. So we came up with a flyer, a PowerPoint slide to go on the town website saying the FinCom is looking for people that la la la, and put it on the Milford TV bulletin board. And we decided we should wait and see if other people come forward.
I think there's no magic to the numbers. Well, I have a few thoughts. First of all, thank you, Al, for the flyer. Although my daughter did say it looked like she had done it with Microsoft Paint from 2008.
Probably. Yes.
But the point is, and if the select board do appoint Ashley, the first thing I'm going to do is have a social media page created for the finance committee, because I think we're behind the times on that. You see the police department has it. I love you, Al, but Citizens TV and the town website is not going to be the audience. We need to get these sorts of recruitment things on social media where the eyeballs are. And we may find other uses for getting social media usage for the finance committee. But going back to my earlier point, I don't really care whether we are 12 or 14 or 15. I want us to have the right mix. And the right mix to me means a few things. It means externally, that everybody on this committee knows how to look at numbers, ask critical questions, be able to interface with department representatives, and get information, but do that in a professional way, not in a way where I have department heads contacting me, telling me that they're having problems with individuals in the finance committee, and that has happened. And internally, it's similarly important that we have people that know how to work within a group and be respectful, because I've been told by senior people in town hall that this is the toughest committee in Milford to manage because of its size and its importance. So to me, it's important that we have those kinds of criteria when we're looking at people to make sure that, notwithstanding our size, we're going to be able to perform our function and do it in a collegial way. Did I interrupt you before with that?
Doesn't matter.
So that is what I plan to send along to the Select Board, with the hopes that they will entertain that at their next Select Board meeting. And then hopefully we can put this issue off to the side of the road for a while and do some active advertising. I'm sure that, there'll be another vacancy or two as the next year or so goes along, and let's, try to find people that will be a good mix, and away you go. Is there anything else we need to accomplish tonight?
Before we move on, though, I just want
Yes,
to thank
yeah.
you guys for the progress and the update. I mean, a month ago, we were struggling with an issue, and we were in a tense position. We were contemplating going to town meeting. It was something we didn't really want to have a fight, right? And I know a lot of work went into finding a compromise and then getting to that point, and also then moving forward with a couple of candidates rapidly. I think that's just a huge amount of progress in a month. So I want to note it, because I think that's a lot versus where we were 30 days ago.
I appreciate that, Brent. It has been a very exhausting 6 weeks, but I think we've made progress, knock wood, and hopefully it'll all be for the best. Anybody else? Okay, how about our favorite motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Michael, second by Brant. David?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Bobby?
Yes.
Lauren? Jerry? Jerry appears to not be there. Chuck?
Yes.
Unanimous with Jerry not voting.
There it is.
Oh,
Who are we voting on?
we're, motion to adjourn. Everyone has said yes, except you, Jerry. Do you have a?
Oh, no, I want to keep it going for another couple hours. I agree, yes.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you all. And the next meeting will be March 12. That will probably be the last time we get to have 4 weeks off. From mid-March to probably mid to late April, we'll have our little crunch time. We'll probably have to have 3, 4, whatever it is, budget meetings. And so just follow up with your people, and I'll see everyone in a month. Thank you all.